Next, I'm moving to staff reports, and we have Christine Walker, our Director of Community Recreation Services, and our Deputy Treasurer, Kristen Watson, regarding Community Washroom Access Project for codename Toilet.
What did you call it?
Toilet Project.
I hate toilet projects.
This is what they were calling it last week.
Let's talk toilets.
Are they low flush?
They will be. They have to be. Thank you for having us here today. We wanted to bring this forward as this is something that's come up in the last month and a half, and we wanted to bring this to council for your consideration. And that is, we're looking at building community washroom access at BICS, at the community school. One is that it's been an ongoing challenge at BICS in terms of not having washroom access. And what we've had in the past has been that we've had to open up the school with custodians in order for any washroom access to be had by the community. It's particularly difficult through the school year on weekends when there's limited custodial people on. And the facility closes at certain hours. Saturdays it closes at 4 p.m. and on Sundays it was closing at 2 p.m. So to actually have any kind of washroom access on the weekends during the school year, it was very limited. And we have activities that the community uses beyond those times, and so there was no washroom access. In the summertime, the facility is closed completely on Saturdays and Sundays. Now we have brought in porta potties over the summer for the last 3 years. And I mean, it's certainly helped, but we have been given the opportunity, as we all know that we signed the municipality signed the joint use agreement with the school district back in May. And we held our first joint management committee in June. And at that time, the school district came to us with a proposal of renovating the changing rooms that are in the gymnasium, renovating them so that there would be actual access from the outdoors and building washrooms that would be community use washrooms. They're undergoing a big facelift this summer, as you're all probably aware and seen, and one is now that they had agreed to install doors from the outside that could lead to these washrooms, and they're located just right off the tennis court area there. We suggested at that point, and that they had proposed that we would share the cost of this renovation. Right now, we're still awaiting the final cost, but it's looking anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000 to actually do the renovation. And we are, just as I mentioned, still waiting for the final construction costs. What I've given council right here is 4 different options in terms of what we can do. The school is, because our budget has been passed, the school district has actually suggested that they would cover the cost until our 2013 budget. And on the auspice that we would pass a resolution, the council agrees to do this, they would carry us until our 2013 budget, which is when we would put that in. There's definitely pros and cons, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but definitely the pros and cons. One of the pros for sure is that there's construction workers already on site who would be actually able to do the work. We wouldn't have to incur any additional costs if we were to wait this out. We obviously have not budgeted it for this year, but that's, we recognize that, and that's one of the scenarios that they put forward. And the big one though is that it would alleviate the pressures of having to bring in a custodian for additional hours to actually open the facility if it's only for washroom access. It's extremely costly to have a custodian on. It's a minimum 4-hour shift, and a custodian cost is far more expensive over the course just to open up washrooms in the school. The second option, as I mentioned, was to carry this forward and that we would actually include it in our 2013 budget. The third option is actually not to proceed with the renovation and determine what the community need was once the new school hours were implemented, as we will be doing this fall. And the fourth was not to proceed with the renovation at all and actually propose to put it into the community center planning project, which could be a little while before that's actually accessed. Throughout this process too, we've come across some grant funding that we feel is applicable to this that would help reduce the costs. One is there's a Community Infrastructure Improvements Fund grant. It's a federal grant that looks at a shared cost of 50-50 that goes towards renovation projects that would benefit the community at large. And we feel we're very eligible for something like that. The second one is that the Community School Connections Program has reinstituted another wave of funding, and there's $12,500 there that the school district has indicated that they would be interested in applying for this project for BICS. And every school district gets the funding and they get to choose which project in which school. And we've been very fortunate because the community schools actually access that funding on 2 other occasions now as well. I'm going to pass it over to you regarding the budget.
Okay, so for this project, council is looking at committing to an expenditure from next year's financial plan, ranging anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000. And that amount would be reduced by any grant monies that we were successful in applying for, and any, a maximum of $25,000 is the gross estimated expenditure to do this configuration of the washrooms. We think there is a good chance of being successful in these grant applications because the funding program for us is that applicants seeking less than $250,000 will receive priority. We are eligible to apply as a local government. And the kinds of projects that they're looking for to fund are the rehabilitation or improvement of existing community infrastructure. So it's not building new things, it's fixing up stuff that you already have. And the other thing that makes this likely to be a successful grant is that eligible projects are looking at leveraging at least 50% of the total eligible project cost from other sources. So because this is a shared venture, again, that makes it, puts this project in a positive light, I would think. Sources of funding that we could be looking for to pay for this project would either come from the community use, the community recreation, other community use fund. Failing that, we could choose either the capital stabilization fund or just general surplus. So this is a project that, if completed, is going to definitely meet a demonstrated community need, and it's an easy one. It doesn't take any of our resources to complete it. The school board is going to undertake the entire construction. They're just asking for some money to help pay for it. So we would like to make the recommendation to council with option 2,
Which would be to proceed with the construction and partnering with the Bowen Island, the West Vancouver School District to build the washrooms, and also for council to direct staff to apply for the funding under the Community Infrastructure Improvement Fund to help to assist in defraying the capital costs.
And there's one further thing that I forgot, which is completely important, but the one concern I had with this was the ongoing maintenance cost of these washrooms, who's gonna clean them, how are we gonna pay for the supplies and stuff. Since the date of our report, we received a letter from the Secretary Treasurer of School District 45, who indicated that they would undertake the maintenance and upkeep of these washrooms within their existing maintenance program at school. So that was the one thing that I was concerned about, but they were willing to look after it for us.
Couple of questions. So we don't have to have the janitor there at all when the washrooms are open?
No.
Okay, that was.
So just to be clear too, the one thing that we've discussed with the school district is a system whereby there's a magnetic lock that's on a timer system. So basically when we want the washrooms to close, whether it's 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., whatever we choose, it will be timed so that the magnetic lock locks it, and we don't have to actually, and it will open it in the morning. So we actually physically don't have to have a person there to open and close, which was another concern of ours as well.
And then the other major concern about most government grants don't pay for work that's been done before the grant's been approved.
No.
So we're all in option 2, if the work's all going to be done, do you think they would support the money, giving us the money?
The way that those government grants work is that when you actually go to submit, and this is what we went through with Deerfield, especially with the Western Diversification, whatever it's called, that one, they will cover, costs incurred between April 1st and March 31st are eligible. There you go.
This year?
Yes.
Even though you've done them before you applied for the grant?
Correct. And they're fine with that, yeah. And really, no work is being done except for the doors are being installed. So the actual renovation inside the building, which the doors weren't going to be a part of the cost. The actual renovation is happening inside the building, and that's not being done until
Until we know we've got the grant?
No, until we have approval from council of action.
No, but my concern was the fact that the work was going to be done before the grant was awarded, and most government grants don't give you, they have a very clear clause in there that says we're not paying for it, so
Yeah.
those dates.
No, costs we incurred between April 1st, 2012 and March 31st, 2014. They did that with our last one as well.
Andrew? Alice, my question was largely answered through what Allison asked, but I guess just to refine it a bit, will the school division be saving any money as a result in terms of staffing? Will these doors being able to automatically open and shut reduce their staffing requirements on the weekends?
I think it'll be a net zero to them because them having that custodian during those times when we were paying for it.
Yes.
So now we won't be paying for it.
Oh.
They likely won't.
So it was complete flow through. We were paying
Yes.
100% of it. Oh,
Yes.
I didn't realize it.
So they won't have any, really there's nothing, there's not a financial benefit for the school district whatsoever on this.
Right.
This is just a community benefit.
Right. Okay.
Two things. I presume you can get out of the washroom. And any idea what we spend annually on this custodian service for after-hours access?
Well, I mean, we don't have an actual number, and of course, just signing the joint use agreement and entering this, our first, we won't really know for sure because our first building that will see access to the facility beyond regular hours won't be until this fall. Is when we're actually implementing the whole joint use agreement at this point in time. So, you know, I think what we're going to see most benefit is may not be financially, but certainly like, you know, in the summer months is going to be tremendous. And even in the evenings and the weekends, additional weekends during the rest of the year.
One direct savings, of course, is the no need for porta potties anymore. So we won't be granting those anymore.
What was the annual cost on that?
About $1,000 a year. And that's for 2.5.
Cody, do you have?
No, most of my questions have been answered. I see this as a practical solution to one of the problems that we had. And, you know, it was still one of those threads that was left undone after the joint use agreement was signed. And I think this is, especially if we do actually are successful in the grants, this is a positive move forward.
My question's been answered. Thanks.
Okay. I think it's great. It sounds like a perfect solution to a massive problem. And I'm in full favor to do it. So where I have a question, and it's just a matter of principle, if I'm looking at an estimate between $25,000 and $50,000, that tells me the work hasn't really been designed at all.
The design is done. We're actually, we were hoping that we were actually going to have the quote for today.
Yeah.
I've been pushing the school district for the last 2 weeks to do that. The construction company that's doing the work on the school right now has not had the time to actually put the quote down on paper, but the drawings have been completed. So, you know, the quote that we got, this $25,000 to $50,000, was coming from the school district as a ballpark right now.
Well, there was a little bit of an alarm bell here.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a plumbing, well, there's not much, it doesn't take much to calculate the plumbing. When I read utilities, so what's that? Is that a new sewer line? So utilities raise alarm when it comes to cost estimations.
It all exists right now. The way that the changing room has a washroom in it, it has water in it, it has all the plumbing.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of reconfiguring, like, it's all there. It's It's got showers in
That's
it.
exactly why I said, well, what does it take to estimate that? Is it either 10, 50 or
Well, I
20,000?
think with respect, it's been answered. They just don't have it.
Right.
Okay. I think Allison's actually ready.
Well, I had a couple of sort of concerns with the resolution. You said on a 50-50 basis with the construction cost not to exceed 25. So is that our share of the construction cost?
Our share,
So I
yes.
think you need to
Okay.
put with the municipality share of the construction cost not to exceed. And then we don't have a funding source and it's not in the budget, it's not in the financial plan. So I think we have to have a clause in there that directs staff to amend the financial plan to, because we have not authorized, this expenditure is not in our financial plan. You can't spend money if you don't have it in your financial plan. So we need to have another clause in here that authorizes the expenditure in the financial plan.
But we're not looking to expend it until after January 1st, 2013.
This motion would direct council during the budget
Okay.
process to add the
To be
money.
funded from
Yeah.
2015,
Yeah.
okay.
The school board's willing to fund it on our behalf.
And then my final concern is, I just cannot believe that April 1 to March 31 is the fiscal year of the federal government. And sometimes somebody in doing, they've never, ever in any grants funded work that's already been done and paid for. So I would really want written confirmation, not just the grant PR that
But
is possibly
Allison,
eligible.
just before we go there, I think Christine and Kristen have both checked on that. And they wouldn't be sitting here saying that we're eligible if we're not eligible.
Well, I guess that's my concern, if it's, Kristen's reading from the PR and
We're not gonna argue with
Can I
that.
Just add to that point, and that is with this grant, you are eligible. So we didn't actually receive our rate grant funding until August of 2010. We actually started the work in June, and they covered all those costs. They covered everything. So when they actually say the eligible funding is for any costs that are incurred between those dates, that's what they base it on. And we were able to claim back all the funding that we actually went through.
Thanks, Kristen.
Sure.
Tim?
So according to these drawings, there's actually not going to be any washroom access from inside anymore?
Right.
They're totally self-funded.
Yeah. They actually decide, the
Do
school
they have no
districts,
problem with
they
that?
don't use those washrooms,
Oh.
storage
Except
size.
for
They
storing
use,
the chairs.
yeah,
Well, and the washrooms they use are right across the hall from the doors in the gym,
yeah,
so.
and they don't, yeah.
And
A question, and then I'd like to move to sort of more of a debate on a policy issue. It was my understanding, Christine, with the reading of your report, that when you mentioned 12 to 25,000, that it seemed to me that the costs were all figured out, that wasn't a question. It was whether or not you would get full 50% of the grant or part of the grant, and that if we moved from $12,000 funding to 25, that would probably mean that we didn't receive the grant or only part of the grant. Is that pretty much what your thinking was?
That's Kristen's, yeah. 25,000 is our maximum contribution. Worst case scenario,
Yeah.
A, if the project is as expensive as it's budgeted to be, and B, we receive no funding.
Yeah.
So at some point, council needs to be willing to expend that amount of funds, worst case scenario. We feel that with the likelihood of grant application plus $50,000 being an overestimate of the cost to put up a few new walls, that we are likely not going to be on the hook for that much, but you have to be prepared that it may cost up to that.
So, a follow-up question. So if we enter into this, we have to be, as far as the school division is concerned, we have to, at this point, be committed to spending up to $25,000.
That's correct.
No matter how it's funded.
That's right.
They won't enter into a conditional agreement.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
thank you. Any other questions?
I hate to be a pain in the butt. I will. When do we hear, is there any concern about the library application and us having to decide to only submit one? Can we submit more than one?
You can submit as many as you want, and the other part of that is the funding that they've announced is over $46 million for the Western provinces, and they believe like BC was up to 23 million as a portion of the share. We're not talking about huge amounts of money that both projects would be applying for, and Tina and I can talk about that too. She just came in. Hi, Tina.
I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
we didn't
Yeah.
identify this one and then have to go back and think about picking and choosing one over the other.
Anything further? I'd just like to comment that to have a publicly accessible handicap washroom on Bowen Island would be a benefit.
I totally agree with the project, my only concern is with the.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't discuss this. Even though it's not a large amount of money, we've deferred a lot of things in the last budget that were infrastructure related, fairly key, and we have to fund this somehow. There was capital stabilization fund was mentioned. Personally, I don't think we should be going there. So we have to fund this either out of new tax revenue or we have to trim somewhere else because the budget going forward is going to be very tight. So I think we should go into this knowing that any money that we spend has to be found from somewhere. And
I think the recreation reserve is where.
The first recommendation was to fund it from that source. However, I know that there may be some who would wish to see that sum of money preserved for a community center facility.
Right.
My second recommendation would be to come from that capital and stabilization fund or cities. But I think it's the most appropriately funded in the recreation reserve.
Well, then I would put that in the motion. I can't support funding something.
What in the motion, sir?
That it be funded from the community recreation reserve.
Put that in there.
Thank you, Chair.
You ready for the question?
Can we read that? What's the amended?
Well, I can reread the last paragraph, but I think agree are the only changes.
Yeah.
Therefore be it resolved that council agree to partner with the West Vancouver School District Number 45 to share the cost to construct the washrooms on a 50-50 basis with the municipality's share of the construction costs not to exceed $25,000 and to be funded from the Community Recreation Reserve in the 2013 budget.
Mover?
So moved.
Seconder? Thank you. Any further question? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.